recent months, the U.S. has faced turmoil and civil unrest following the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor at the hands of police officers. And the corporate response has been significant, with companies from Nike to Ben & Jerry's releasing statements emphasizing their commitment to diversity and inclusion. The outpouring of support is unprecedented, and digital signage company Four Winds Interactive is one organization that is going beyond statements to drive greater inclusion at their workplace. Here, CHRO Courtney Graham shares some of her inclusion strategies and best practices for HR leaders navigating this tense moment in our country's history. How did your company respond to the civil unrest following the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor?
Immediately after those events, we really leveraged something that we already had in place, and it's a weekly conversation that we have with the entire company, and we call it LLAMA, and it stands for Leadership Listens, Ask Me Anything. And that weekly conversation that we do over Zoom, again, with the entire company, it really stemmed when we were introduced with the COVID-19 pandemic. But when these incidents happened, we kind of shifted gears and still used that same forum to create a safe space for conversation, but really put the emphasis on, again, creating that space for questions, for concerns. We have a system where people can submit questions anonymously, and we will read those questions verbatim, and leadership will answer them, but also people can speak out and share what they're thinking. And there isn't just one approach, right, to respond to that kind of civil unrest. We really have to target it from multiple avenues. And so that's one thing that has served us really, really well, is just by having that consistent space for free conversation. So that's one thing. Of course, we, like most companies, we did release a company statement on social media, but we followed that up with written communication to our company, and we also send out weekly communication to all of our employees, and that would cover anything from topics discussed in that LLAMA meeting, which certainly pertained to, those recent unfortunate hate crimes, and also provided resources. And so some of those resources were related to mental illness. Some of them were related to what to do if you're feeling anxious or deeply saddened. For example, the Colorado Crisis Service, that's always available 24/7. We talked about current benefits that we have that employees can leverage, like an employee assistance program. We also sent out information and links to websites so that if people wanted to protest, they could understand how to do it safely, and also links so that people know their rights. We also sent out other sorts of support links related to signing petitions and registering to vote, and ways to donate personally to Black Lives Matter, and a variety of other ways. We also realize that some people can't donate, and so what are some other ways that they can get involved and educate themselves and be supportive to our community? And so I think just by tackling it in a variety of ways has been really helpful to us. Really, it's such a devastating situation, and as a country and as a company, we've got a long ways to go. And so just really thinking about all of the different ways that we can provide support for our employees and our community.
Can you share some communication best practices for HR leaders who are struggling to navigate these different conversations about race?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I certainly don't have all the answers there, and I also am well aware that well-intended conversations about combating racism have plenty of opportunity to go awry. In my experience and just what we've done at Four Winds, I believe that when you set a clear goal for the conversation, that is really helpful. And so the goal might be just really to invite employees to come together and share their feelings and their experiences, and especially as it relates to their experience in the workplace and that employee experience. So I think just setting that conversation with a clear goal and communicating what that is. I also believe that in those conversations, especially from a human resource perspective and from a leadership perspective, it is incredibly important to acknowledge our track record, right? So if there are areas where we fell short in the past, let's take responsibility for that and acknowledge it and put it on the table and be transparent about it. I think transparency in times like this is the only way to approach those conversations, and also with humility, and to say where we may have fallen short and recognize it and take that ownership. Another thing that I know is being socialized a lot right now is just how to approach those conversations. And one thing we're being really aware of is not asking Black employees to solve racism, right? And so really being mindful and educating our company and doing that through a variety of ways, through formal trainings, but also through watching documentaries together, reading books. We just bought the book White Fragility for all of our employees, and then creating a space to talk about it. And I think the best thing to do is to encourage those conversations, as hard as they are and as uncomfortable as they can be, to encourage those conversations and to create the space to do that.
Do you think this event and the momentum that you created will create lasting cultural change at your organization?
Absolutely. As horrifying as these events have been, it has 100% built community in our organization and has absolutely increased empathy. Instead of focusing just on diversity, which is an easy thing to focus on numbers, focus on stats, focus on those kinds of evaluations, we're really trying to shift gears and focus on inclusivity and really thinking about how do we remove barriers that keep all employees from participating equally in the workplace. And when we think of equity in the workplace and in our culture, equity means making sure that everyone's voices are heard and they're valued and they're recognized. And during this time, not only focusing on training, because that is really important to make sure that we're educating our employees, but also think of ways to increase transparency around how we make decisions. And, that could be from compensation to promotions to team diversity to benefits to looking at gender-neutral types of benefits, but increasing transparency around how we make decisions as an organization as it relates to our employee experience and our workforce. And then I guess the third thing I would mention there is really being creative and thinking about all of the different things that we can do to continuously increase the employee experience and create a lasting culture, as you had mentioned. And one of the things that this whole time period has made us reevaluate as to how we're prioritizing DE&I. One of the things that we did after these events was create a chief diversity officer that is part of her job. And so we gave the chief design officer the responsibility to really lead the charge for DE&I, not only for our internal community, but also with our clients. And that's a new thing that's happened, and we're still in the kind of building phase of that, but already just the creativity that has come out of that group has been monumental for us, and we're really excited to see where that takes us.
Moving forward, how do you plan to make sure that your workplace is more inclusive for people of color?
Well, I think I'll go back to what I had mentioned earlier about rethinking how we're managing and including our DE&I efforts in our business strategy moving forward. And so one of the ways we did that was by making it part of someone's job. In the past, I think something that we struggled with was that obviously it's something that people operations, and as the chief people officer, it's something that's always top of mind in everything that we do. but we didn't invest as a company into saying, this is like in your job description. And we didn't feel like we were large enough to have, per se, a chief diversity officer. And so one of the recent changes we made was to give our chief design officer the baton to her to really lead the charge with our DE&I efforts. And with that, she has restructured our DE&I committee so that she and I will both partner together as far as being executive sponsors, but really having then a committee and squads. We're calling them squads and squad leaders, and those having different groups that people can be part of to talk about things that matter. So, for example, veterans or Black professionals, LGBTQIA, women, Indigenous professionals, the list can kind of go on, but really thinking creatively and leaning on our people to say what matters to you, and then creating that space for those people to come together and talk about it, but also to, more importantly, to help us make change. And right now, we haven't made this formal change yet, but we are in discussion of adding it to those individual job descriptions and giving them maybe 10 to 15% of their time to step away from their job and to focus on these topics and these efforts so that they can improve our workplace and our community and ultimately our employee experience.